The future of procurement is moving at Mach speed 1. Between the complexities of RFPs and the rapid-fire evolution of AI, you need a steady hand at the helm. Welcome to Ground Control. Meet your leads for this mission, Perry Robinson and Christina Godfrey-Carter. They're here to bridge the gap between traditional proposal management and the high-tech future. We aren't just talking about the future of tech, we're making sure you're ready to control it. Ground Control is officially online. Let's get to work.
Thank you for joining today. Let's just start off by saying who each of us are. For the record, this is not a deposition, but I'm Perry Robinson. And Chris, just go ahead and introduce yourself, and then I'll ask you a question about why you started Stargazy. We'll start chatting.
I'm Chris Carter. People call me Christina Carter. I get asked this every day, like, which one do you want to go by? I don't care.
I was going to ask you, what do you want to go on the podcast? Because I call you Chris on the red emails, and then, which one do you like to do?
I don't, both work, just whichever feels right. Yeah, so my background is completely in proposals. Like, I started out at the very beginning, junior bid writer, proposal writer. I didn't even know what an RFP was when I got hired. Like, why they hired me is still kind of insane to me. But then working up to managing teams, international teams, working at really fun companies like Instructure, Zendesk, AWS. And then starting Stargazy, it really happened because I was getting a lot of questions. Like, generative AI, LLMs were becoming like the thing everyone was talking about. And of course, they looked at proposals and said, hey, these two things work together, but we don't know best practices for putting them in together. So come in and consult with us, help us figure that out. So I started out that way. And then I realized there's like no data or like book of best practices. So it's really like working with the industry, seeing, what the new normal is and figuring out like where we are today, like buying best practices, data, everything like that. And it's kind of what I'm obsessed with, I guess.
We're lucky to be obsessed with it. So it's great to have somebody in the space that's really focused in on it. Stargazy, the name, right? So you're on Ground Control, right? Podcast, talking with folks from Rocket Docs and Stargazy. So it seems like all that stuff was planned. But, we met after you named Stargazy. Why the name Stargazy?
If you're over here in England, then it's Stargazy pie. Like, everyone's heard of that. Actually, I find that would not be something I want to eat. But Stargazy pie it was just like a fun, but I did start out with thinking, like, I do want it to be like kind of looking at the stars, like almost as a joke, like, where are we going here? Like, how do we navigate this? What is the art of the possible? And so it just kind of has that like dreamer type feel to it. So that really is it's just trying to be fun.
Yeah, I get it. The graphics, actually, they're kind of like a navigator.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me think about the old times of navigating on a ship.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And so cool. Okay, and then you got to tell us, like, how'd you end up in the UK? Because you're not a UK native.
Oh, you can tell with my voice. Yeah, it's so gosh, it was forever ago. A company that I was at moved me out to various different countries. The last one I ended up was here, and I liked it, so I just stayed. And just kind of it was fun because it was a full new way of thinking about proposals, like with the frameworks that are on over here. How people buy is a little bit different. So it was just a new challenge.
Yeah, I've experienced the same thing. I've done a lot of, so I used to do a lot of work as a lawyer in-house for tech companies, and so lots and lots of agreements. And initially, I thought it was just the way people spelled words that changed different in the UK, and then I realized that there were different contracting terms, and then I realized there was a whole different process to negotiating, right? And so it's just a little bit less legalistic, I'd say. But inside of the RFP space, when I started doing that, there's a whole vocabulary and terminology that I think is a little bit UK centric on that side. So did you end up going through that same experience where you learned all the UK centric terms for bids, tenders, all the rest of the stuff like that?
Yeah, I still don't know how to speak correctly to anybody. Like, I always am mixing up like the US, UK terms, and people get it. People know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
You created your report. Is it going to be an annual report? And what made you decide to take on such a Herculean task? Because the report you generated is absolutely fantastic. I read it. And the first thing I thought was, oh my God, like Gartner tries to put out reports like this. Forrester tries to put out reports like this. And they've got large teams of researchers that are working on it with massive amounts of data. And, I don't think they did anywhere near as well as you did on the first one you created. So tell us a little bit about why you created the report in the first place, and maybe a couple things that you learned as well.
The main reason why I created the report is because it doesn't exist really to that extent. And I think right now the biggest challenge that a lot of revenue and sales leaders have when they do go and purchase these tools is there are so many nowadays, and it makes it really hard to choose. And maybe they used one in their past company, and so they want to bring that in. Very understandable. Like, it feels like there's less risk to do that. But it means that they're often usually purchasing or shortlisting tools for the wrong reason. The report was focused on, here is a huge list of tools, and here's the spaces that they're good in. But it's a huge focus of it is, hey, every single proposal team or response team, what deal desk team, whatever you are, has a really specific problem, usually like one massive problem that they're all facing, even if they have a high win rate. So what is that issue? Now, buy software that's going to help you solve whatever that issue is, whether that is a process, whether there is win rate or speed of response or like trust fidelity. Like, it's going to be all of those things, and then then go to that short list of tools to fix the problem that you're having. And I don't feel like that exists right now. And I'm not saying the report was perfect, because it wasn't. Like, we have a lot to learn from it, but that is where we wanted to come from. And you asked about like what I learned. That is like, there's a lot of software out there. Like, there's about 500 that we had to sift through. And even then we shortlisted. We took a bunch out. Like, if they're still in beta, if we don't find they have a customer, or we feel like it is just like a ChatGPT wrapper type situation, then we don't talk about it. But even then, we missed out on quite a few that messaged me after, say, hey, you forgot about us, and they're legitimate companies. So I think what I learned isn't, oh, I missed some. It was that this space is moving and changing so rapidly. And so an annual report, I don't think is enough. I do think it does need to be updated far more than that, or I think it's going to be irrelevant in a month from now, which I don't think is just proposal software, revenue software space. I think it's probably all SaaS is going to be like this.
So it's a faster moving world today, right? And I think a lot of it comes from AI, which isn't new. It's new to a lot of people, but the speed with which AI technology is developing is certainly a newer thing for us all to deal with.
Yeah.
When it comes to the report, and by the way, we'll post a link to the report for anybody who's watching, right? You can find it, from us here. So please go and grab a copy and read it. How do you want people to use the report? What do you think the best way for them to approach it's going to be? Because it is detailed, right? And it's not a short document. This isn't a executive white paper that's just one page, which is great because it provides detailed information, analysis, reporting. But how would you say people should approach the report to make the best use of it?
What do you mean people don't want to read 65 pages of a report?
Okay, maybe some of us do, but
No, so my suggestion is use like the cool tools that are available nowadays. Like, what my suggestion to people who like go on the website is use Notebook LM. Like, literally, like, it's already in there. You don't even have to upload it, and it's going to answer questions for you. Like, so you can literally go in and say, hey, here's my industry, here's the size of my team, here's the issue I think I'm finding. What do you think I should be looking at? Or even like, I don't know what my issue is, but here's some things I'm thinking about. And it's going to give you that information. So instead of having to read through it, you can almost like have a conversation with the report instead of reading 65 pages, which, like, if you want to do, go ahead.
It's interesting you mentioned that. So it's, we can use, AI technology tools today, right, to help us access information on that side. One of the things that you do is you evaluate, different types of tools inside of the report and different ones using AI. But one thing that always comes up as a question for me is, like, when you're thinking about people who are doing this day in and day out, and by doing this, I don't mean selecting tools. I mean using different tools to help them answer RFPs, CDQs, vendor qualification, any of the questionnaires. What would be the way that you think that they're best able to evaluate what it is that their business is doing and what the requirements are, so they can even write the prompt that helps them to understand where to start doing that. Because I feel like I hear so often about how busy a lot of these professionals are, and they're very focused on a niche area of the business. Even though they have a tremendous amount of broad knowledge about their company, they oftentimes don't get to like pull up to that 30,000 foot view and take a look and see everything, from that, high height, and say, okay, this is where our company's going. So with that in mind, with that in mind, do you think that there's a specific way that RFP professionals should be approaching looking at their business to understand what tool they should be looking for in the first place?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think if you are responding to RFPs or whatever type of questionnaires that you are responding to, you probably don't sit down and think, like you're saying, oh, here's the problem I keep having. This is what keeps frustrating me. So you're right. Like you are going to have to sit down and put that in your calendar and say that I'm going to just like think about my last 5 RFPs or questionnaires. What was bad about it? Like what, like not even like what made us lose or win, what did I dislike about it? And what did my team dislike about it? And I don't think you even have to be that introspective or take that long to figure that out. I think it's going to come to you just thinking about the past 5 ones you've done. And then when it comes to like that, the overseeing kind of everything, not just the RFPs, it might even be just having that conversation with your revenue leader and just saying, hey, like what are your thoughts about our RFPs and questionnaire processes? Like, what do you hear? And I think that might be a scary conversation to have, but I think it can, obviously you're going to get a lot of information from that conversation and also open doors with that revenue leader to have more conversations like that and be
Yeah.
even a driver of change in that. So that would be my suggestion. Yes, you're busy. Make time for it anyway. It's important. Yeah.
I love the idea of speaking to the revenue leader too, right? I think sometimes, I found that we all can have a tendency to, think about the revenue leader as being somebody who, one, that could be really, really high level from your perspective. Maybe they're sitting multiple levels of reporting above you. They meet with salespeople all the time, right? That's something that they definitely do. And it doesn't matter that the salespeople are 4 levels away from the CRO or something like that. But it can be a little bit scary to go into those discussions, I think, for folks sometimes, because, there's not always the same level of interaction that happens with RFP, and proposal professionals, right? They are, oftentimes just really deep inside of the work itself. So I love the idea of talking to them. Do you have any ideas or tricks on the best way to approach those folks and to even kick off a discussion like that?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So I have a couple. I think the second one is going to be like very specific, but the first one really is have a mindset shift. Now, of course, like every once in a while, you're going to have a revenue or sales leader who isn't nice. They're a bit of a jerk. But for the most part, people are nice and they do want to help you because if you guys are doing well, that means they're doing well because you're impacting the revenue. So what I have found in every single company that I worked with in every single role, I've been able to speak with people far, far, far above my level. Sometimes, like even within AWS, far, far above my level. And they were very happy to speak with me. They were able to give me really good ideas, and they were able to even mentor me in what I was able to do, despite them being like at AWS, for example, like L10s, and that's really quite high up at AWS. So it's
Yeah.
people are usually really happy to speak with you. So if you're afraid, I'm not gonna say just don't be, but do it anyway. Do that scary thing, and you'll find out it's really not that scary, and that you actually will create good relationships with those revenue leaders, which is what you want. And then, of course, like when you do go in there, don't just go in there to have like a nice chat, as fun as that is. Go in there with data, go in there with a point of view, because you are the expert in winning RFPs or submitting questionnaires. And you probably have a lot of that data. You know what's going on, what's working, what's not working from your perspective. And that will be of interest to them, especially if you like listen to them during sales calls or whatever it is where they speak. They probably use specific words and you know what they care about. Use their language, talk about what they care about, with RFPs. And I think it'll be a really productive conversation.
Yeah, that's
Usually.
good advice. It's interesting because when I am talking to folks, like I'm just out in the world, and the question comes up, what do you do? And I tell people about Rocket Docs, and obviously the name doesn't imply exactly what the company does. So you have to figure out how to address telling people about, the work itself. And so for me, what I'll say is like, do you know about RFPs? And if they say yes, I'm like, okay, well, how it's a critical part of the sales process that nobody really likes to do. And it's not really true that nobody likes to do it. There are a lot of folks that are really passionate about it. But when it comes to like a chief revenue officer or sales leaders, like they do see, RFPs oftentimes as being one of the things that just has to get done in order to make the sale go forward. But it's a critical part of the sales process as well. So, when it comes to that and dealing with the scenarios where you get into that meeting, you're talking with them, you're presenting the data, you have any tricks of the trade that you've learned that help to, persuade the CRO or the sales leader to be thinking about it more from the perspective like, hey, this is a critical aspect of the sales process, as opposed to the part where it's like, oh, the RFP is just something that we have to get through, and I hate that we have to do it.
Yeah, I have to admit, I've been really lucky. Most of the sales and revenue leaders I've worked with have just gotten it, like that it was important, even if like they didn't love it. Like I don't love negotiation. I mean, it was all parts of the sales process we don't love, but that's why I'm hired. But what I have found is that does resonate with them. And like I said, I've never dealt with like somebody who really like dismissed what I did. So I don't necessarily have advice for those people. But what did really matter is if I could show the percentage of revenue like closed won opportunities that come from RFPs or questionnaires. And also, if I can look at, usually this data is somewhere in a CRM, usually this part is accurate, like how long a sales cycle is, if it's an RFP versus not an RFP, that's going to be interesting to them. The cost of responding to an RFP versus not responding to an RFP. This is data that's pretty easy to put together, especially if you're just doing like the past 6 months or past year. Super interesting to them. I'm not going to say they're going to love RFPs, but they are going to see how important that process is to their revenue and their pipeline, which of course is what most of them care about.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been in places where I've been at companies that have started out like very much on the small side and grown to very large organizations. And so I've gotten to see the evolution inside of the business of understanding about RFPs from the, do we have to do this, to having, full teams to respond to it. And I've been inside, I've been in the place where I'm like, I'm early in and writing the responses, I'm putting together responses to our RFPs, right? And doing so without any structure or organization. And I'm old enough now that I've been doing this that I can remember when, like, we just didn't know about tools were out there, but they were, right? There have been tools, but to your point today, there's like, it's hard to not find a tool that is able to help you to answer RFPs today. There are so many out there. And so moving from manual spreadsheets, right? And there's still some companies today that are doing that, by the way. But
a lot, yeah.
But when you think about that evolution of, proposal management, strategic response, and moving from spreadsheets to tools to, that are software based to AI powered tools, what would you give as like the best piece of advice for people to, like what's the launching point? What is the launching point for them to start the process of making that move from spreadsheet, if they're still on it today, to looking at tools? Because if you've used one in the past, you maybe come with a different perspective. But if you're still on spreadsheets, right, then it's almost like it's a brave new world of all these companies out there. And then going back to you can frame out the prompt and kind of inquire with your report and stuff like that. But it's still a big lift. So going into some advice on that side for people that are newbies coming out from spreadsheets and going out to an RFP response tool for the first time.
Yeah, there'd be two main things. And I'd be really curious to hear what you have to say, because I know you've seen this a lot. The first thing is, outside of work, obviously not using your company data, go and like use the latest and greatest LLMs. Like, I don't care if it's ChatGPT or Claude, and watch like a YouTube video and just figure it out if you haven't already. That gives you the art of the possible. Like, what can Claude skills automate? Like what do projects do? Things like that are really useful just to know, like, outside of software, like proposal software, like what is out there. And then, then of course you have to temper the reality of like, especially if you are in a highly regulated market, what's possible for you. I would go talk to, the buyer on your side, like whether that's probably your CISO or somebody like high up in IT who's making those decisions based on security, like the barriers that you have there, and say, hey, like what is possible? Because yeah, it probably isn't using Claude skills or Claude code, but there is a software out there that is going to be able to match how secure you need to be, whether that is like literally storing it in house and nothing goes anywhere. Like a tool out there exists for you, like an AI powered tool probably even exists for you. So like, yeah, it's the two things. Figure out what's even possible out there, because it's what would happen 6 months ago isn't there. The tools that you used 2 years ago at a different company, not the art of the possible anymore. Then go figure out what's possible within your company and marry those two up. Yeah.
You mentioned Claude, and you mentioned Claude Code, and I think it's in part because there are a lot of folks that I'm finding today that are like, oh, we'll just build our own tool, or they're just saying, hey, look, I'm just going to brute force a response, and I call it brute forcing because it's really just taking an RFP and loading it up into ChatGPT or Claude or Microsoft Copilot and saying, answer this for me. I even heard somebody say it tongue in cheek in a conference on sales operations where he goes, you get RFPs. And he goes, just toss it into ChatGPT and it'll write a response for you, which is true, right?
Yeah,
It will.
sure.
It will write a response for you.
Well,
So when it comes to using ChatGPT or Claude to answer an RFP, are there any organizations to which that is just perfectly suited as a possibility? Or do you recommend that people always look to use a tool purpose-built for RFP response?
that's such a hard question. And I'm getting this question a lot. Like I probably get an email at least once or twice a day or a LinkedIn DM asking me to build out some sort of cloud automation for RFPs, which is great that people think that I'm capable of doing that. I think there are really specific circumstances where that is going to work for you. And it is if you are like a really early startup, you're not in a highly regulated market, and the data that you have is really not important if it goes anywhere. And also if you are able to prompt it in such a way that makes it really, really tailored to what your customer is asking, having that customer insight, all that fun stuff. That is a really small subset of people. And for the vast majority of people who are listening to this, that is not a good idea for so many reasons, like security reasons, like making sure it's personalized. Yes, it will respond to your RFP. Like you're saying, you're going to get a proposal out of it. A winning high trust fidelity proposal? No, absolutely not. Like that's not going to be auditable. Like when you have to show like why you answered a question a certain way and how you like looked at that within your team, you're not going to be able to do that. Like no matter how you prompt Claude to do that, it's just not going to happen. So for the vast majority of teams, no. Like you need to use a purpose-built tool. At the same time, like I do think you need to look at what purpose-built tools are out there for you to make sure that it is going to meet your security.
And please get great guidance in there. So, I think at the end of the day, right, part of what you're saying as well is that, no matter what tool you're using, right, you need to really review the output.
Yeah.
And make sure that it's the quality level that's needed to line up with the value of the opportunity that you're pursuing, right? But I guess also what you're saying is that, depending on the tool, the amount of work that you need to do to review whether it's gotten the answer right to start and whether it's traceable back to a piece of information that you can use later on to support your answer is also a critical component.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm glad that you summarized that for me. That's what I wanted to say.
That makes me think about one thing that's been on my mind a lot lately, which is, we have a lot of folks out there that are really concerned about, the idea that AI is going to take over their work, their job, especially in this space, because the tooling is becoming so much more capable. With that said, part of what you were just talking about as well was that a key component is making sure that you've written a strong proposal that persuasively sells your organization. So you've looked at a lot of the tools out there today. Do you think that AI is anywhere close to being able to do the persuasive writing portion, regardless of what the tool is, as compared to a person who does this for working that is a proposal professional or an RFP response professional?
So I think that if you are a proposal professional who is used to kind of gliding along and just copying and pasting from your content library and doing very minimal tailoring, then yeah, it's going to do just as well or better than you. But the vast majority of, proposal professionals are trying to win. They're trying to do a great job. It's not going to be as good as you. Yes, it can absolutely use customer insights that you have and then help tailor your response based on that information. But there's always something missing. Like it's never quite like even no matter how well you prompt it to sound like you, it's always not quite right. No matter what you do. And I've seen really clever people prompt, their tools to be good. But like I said, it'll get you to the short list. You're gonna get there. But will it persuade or win? That to me is questionable. I think another problem with it is AI is really good for responding in a way that you want it to, like in a really specific order. But at the same time, a lot of the times our procurement teams are reviewing our responses, and they're reviewing it in a very specific way that for some, like you think AI would be writing really well for an AI to review it, but it's not. And so at the same time, like I just think you need a human in there just to make it really persuasive. But then on top of that, AI is not perfect. It is going to hallucinate. It is going to make up, content about you. You need someone in there to make sure that they review it. You should not be just having it put it out and then send it over. You absolutely need that review. So a compliance review, an accuracy review, and then just a persuasiveness, does this sound good review.
Yeah. It's interesting because there's two things that come to mind when you say that is on the compliance review, legal review, accuracy review across the board, right? Generative AI doesn't create the same thing each time. It's always a little bit different, right? And yet, right, we have this conundrum, which is that generative AI produces what are pretty recognizable writing styles oftentimes, especially if you're using a Claude or a ChatGPT. You can see it in the formatting, you can see it in the way that people write. Like I can tell the way that Hemingway writes, and it's different than the way that William Faulkner writes. And so you get these big differences in styles, but you don't get those differences in styles with generative AI, it seems. So the conundrum is that as more people use these AI tools to write responses, do they start to actually get more and more similar to one another so that it's less competitive, it's less persuasive in terms of differentiating your business from another business, while at the same time, you're not getting the benefit of being able to rely on a consistent response that's the same answer to the same question in an RFP that comes through in year one when you're trying to win the business. And then let's say that the vendor asks the same question in year two as a follow-up as part of a vendor qualification questionnaire that they're doing, right? There's that weird balance of, or not even balance, it's actually an oppositional situation. So when you think about that space where on the one hand, AI creates a new answer every time, and on the other hand, even though it's creating a new answer, it's writing it in such a way that everybody starts to sound like the same flavor of vanilla ice cream.
Okay, so yes, if you're in B2B, enterprise SaaS, it doesn't have to be deterministic. It can kind of sound a little bit wild. The worst thing that's going to happen is if you review it and as long as it's accurate, that's okay. But you're right, it will overinflate things oftentimes. And if you're in a highly regulated industry, that's a problem. If you overstate what you can do a little bit, that's a problem. If you can't, like you're saying, it doesn't have the exact same answer, it's not a deterministic answer the next time around, that's a problem. Not all industries that matters so much, but yeah, in highly regulated ones it does. In terms of it sounding the same as everybody else's, I have seen people prompt it so well that it does sound pretty good, but not like Claude or ChatGPT writes. But once again, there's always something kind of missing from it. You have to be the top 1% of prompters. And I know everyone thinks that they're good at prompting. I think I'm good at prompting. the vast majority of us were just not good enough to get that level of really different from everybody else sounding, where it sounds like a human wrote it. Like I'm not there. And so you're probably not there, so it doesn't matter. And then if you aren't, you're right, you're going to sound just like everybody else. And if you're responding to an RFP, the whole point is to differentiate yourself, not to sound like everybody else. Like as a first draft, yeah, but then you need to go in there and make it you.
So thinking about, we've talked a lot about regulated companies and companies that have a lot of compliance obligations. And we've talked about there being so many different options out there today. I'm thinking about like, how do we help companies to understand how to separate out the solutions that are best from them from the ones that just do a really good job of marketing? Because let's be honest. Nobody goes and puts up their solution and says, we have really low security. Nobody puts onto their homepage as a feature benefit that, our solution answers your RFP quickly, and we do it by exchanging all the information with a third-party provider. That's not the part that they say. Everybody says, like, we have a reliable, secure, confidential system. And today, right, one of the credentials that oftentimes was the reliable one to say, like, can I use this? The, SOC 2 report. There's a lot of controversy out there because we found that there are a lot of SOC 2 report mills that are operating, and some of them are getting in trouble, quite publicly right now. So if you're thinking about that, because in the old days, I would have said, just check to see the report, read it, see what the scope is. But now we don't even necessarily have the capability to rely on that. If you're advising somebody on the best way for them to identify a solution that's going to work for them and telling them how they can find that one solution or those 3 solutions to choose from out of the 50 or 500 that are out there, what's your advice on how they should go through the selection process?
I think even if a software has, the features that you love and want so much to use, it doesn't matter if they're not going to meet your security and trust fidelity requirements. Like, so that has to be the number one. Like, what auditability do you need? What verification do you need? Like, where is your data residing? All that stuff. So that is obviously going to be really unique to every single company. So my suggestion is always speak to your CISO, your chief risk officer, like whoever that is in your company, to figure out what your regulatory exposure is going to look like. If you're in the EU, what does the EU AI Act say? Like, what can you do there? Same with the UK. We have like our own little things that we have to be looking at. So have that conversation with the right person in your company to decide what that shortlist looks like. And then like you have to straight up ask the people before you, I would say, even have a demo with them, like, hey, can you do these things? Because if not, like, it doesn't matter how good the demo is or how good their marketing is, you can't go with them. So figure out what that shortlist is first. And I agree with you about the SOC 2 situation. I do know people who have not in the AI RFP space who have done that, and it's quite upsetting. So I'm with you. You got to ask these really, really specific questions and get a really specific answer back. Yeah.
It's interesting. We do get it a lot more often now because I think a lot of people are trying to get a better understanding.
Yeah, and then like what from your side, I get worried when the answers come back and they sound like marketing or there's no specifics behind it.
Yeah.
Like, how specific do you think people need to be in order to feel comfortable?
That's a great question. You can flip the table on me on this one.
Yeah,
I think that the answer to that one is it's you've got to understand, again, your business and its requirements. So the more regulated you are, or the more that you're dealing with higher value contracts, right? The higher the value of the contract, it might as well just be more regulated because there's a lot of money at stake, and people are depending on the accuracy. So when it comes to, or the confidentiality as well. So when it comes to the specific, like, how do you get past the marketing answers to it? Ask for details, right? Like, please provide me with each of the contractual provisions that demonstrate that my information is going to be maintained confidentially. Provide me with a data flow diagram, right? We know that there's DPIAs that are done as well, data privacy impact analysis. So it's like, did you do a data privacy impact analysis of your work with this vendor? And can you provide a copy of that to me to see? Because at that point, they've created the document for internal purposes for their privacy team or the data protection team to understand how the data is being used, and there's no way to fluff that one back up. And if they refuse to provide it, then I think you've got a red flag right there.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll flip around to question you again on this part. Interestingly, I think that there's been a shift inside of even regulated businesses to say, like, let's just get it done. Like, we can use whatever it is. We'll take on a little bit more risk than usual. And I think it's in part because of, this board level directive, go and adopt AI for efficiency's sake. But inside of, the proposal response space, it's the same thing that decades ago, people were told, like, don't worry about writing a really high quality answer, right? Or researching this, just get it done. We forgot about it. It's due tomorrow. Just get me a draft in 4 hours, even though it's 3 days of work to actually produce this. So is there really a difference that's happening at all? Or are we seeing the same thing repeated in a different way when it comes to the pressure put on RFP teams just to figure out a fast way to produce a response versus producing a response that has accurate, supportable answers that are written?
So I agree with you. Yeah, it is. I mean, of course, these people are feeling pressure from the board to put in their AI, transformation. I get it. But the other thing the board really cares about is how much revenue and profit the company is making. And so, like, they probably care about that more. They're talking about AI because they feel like they should be, and their friends are talking about it. But they're not going to care about that as much as they're about the revenue and profit that you're bringing in. So if your proposals or your responses to questionnaires are getting you shortlisted but not helping you win, what's the point of doing it? It doesn't matter how fast it is, you still wasted time. And if you did get shortlisted, you have to go and, depending what industry, and you have to demo, interview, that takes a lot of people, a lot of time, a lot of money, and opportunity costs you could be spending on something else. Is that really a good decision? Is that what you really want to be doing? And of course, like, it depends what market you're in, but there are other ways to go about it. If, like, you did get an RFP and you forgot about it and it's due tomorrow, well, if they really wanted you to win, obviously this depends on industry, like, ask them if they can extend the deadline, and they will if they want you there. Do a proactive proposal, like submit something that's not going to be responsive to the RFP, but will get you shortlisted maybe for next time. There's so many things you could do that can win you the deal for next time, but like a poorly done RFP or response to an RFP isn't going to do that this time around. Like, even no matter how lovely of an AI draft that you submit, they can also, like, present a lot of risk, and not going to be, if you're in a highly regulated industry, it's just a bad idea in general. You're going to mess up if it's more than a day's worth of work.
Yeah, it's hard when teams are actually having to evaluate whether to answer an RFP to participate in the process at all. But those are great pieces of advice to to stay in the game when you know that you should be there anyway. Different question. Once upon a time, privacy wasn't a set of questions on its own, right? But today we be shocked to find that there's a scenario where there's not a set of questions that are related to privacy. And the same thing with information security.
Yeah.
If you go back even further, do you think that now that we're starting to see more questions about either AI governance or how AI tools have been used to prepare the response, that's going to become its own section with its?
Yeah, I'm hearing this a lot, and in every geography and every industry. And so it's happening, whether it's just a couple of questions or multiple questions. I think the problem, though, is it's really ambiguous usually, like what they want from you. Like, if you're a part of the EU, the EU AI Act is going to make it clear what you can do if you're in public sector. But for everybody else, like, what does it even mean? Like, what do they want you to answer with? And, like, everyone is going to have a little bit of AI somewhere probably in their sales process. So my suggestion is during the Q&A, ask about it. Like, get a really clear response of, like, what they want from it, and then try and follow it, like, what they actually want you to do about it. And even if they're even evaluating it on some sort of scale, because maybe they're not, maybe they just want it for their own information. So it's so different for every geography and every industry of, like, why they're doing it. And I think that's the tough part.
The questions that are coming up today as well that are saying you have to confirm that you did not use AI to respond to this RFP. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, we are seeing it. Don't use it. if you can't, like, they can't prove it if you didn't. Did you use AI or not? Tools like don't work at all. Like, you can put Jane Austen in and it says AI wrote it. It's just they can't prove it, but obviously follow the rules as much as possible. But my suggestion is to always push back. Like, why? Why can't we use AI? Especially if like someone reviews it and we make sure it's accurate. I would always push back.
A lot of the RFP issuance companies are themselves using it to analyze things. So with that in mind, right? People are issuing RFPs using AI tools, and they're using the AI tools to evaluate the responses back. And people are using AI tools to answer RFPs and to prepare them, and maybe they're going through a detailed review, and maybe they're just relying heavily on the answer that's generated. That's something that didn't happen, just a few years ago, right? We didn't have both sides of the equation heavily relying on tools to do a significant portion of the work. And I think even 2 years ago, we would have said, well, that's probably a little bit further ways out. Stargazy is a kind of a futuristic looking name. It's thinking about helping people navigate across area. Where do you see the space going in the next 2 years? What do you think is going to be, what do you think is going to be like in 2028 for RFP managers when they're sitting down at their desk at the beginning of the day about to start their work? What'll change? What'll be the same?
Be exactly the same. No, I think it does depend what industry you're in. I think if you're in a highly regulated market, it will definitely change, but maybe a little bit slower than the not regulated industries, which is totally fine. But I think the cool thing about that is you can look at what less regulated industries are doing. Like, let's go look at the SaaS, enterprise SaaS, B2B space, see what they're doing, and you can watch them mess up, see what they're doing wrong, so you can kind of learn from them. So when, it's your time to come around to actually, use maybe a little bit different tools and software and processes, like you've already learned from them. I think the difference is, though, for less regulated markets, it's going to be very, very different. We're already seeing it. Like, instead of, an RFP necessarily being issued, it's more of like, hey, here's a set of questions, but we want you to put like together a trust center, a trust hub. Like, these have a bunch of different names, and I want that to automatically respond to my questionnaire or my RFP. And that's where a lot of the space is going. So that doesn't mean our jobs are gone, but they are different. Like, that means that you need to be like a knowledge curator of all that content where all these RFPs and questionnaires get sent to. That has to be a fantastic database of knowledge that connects to so many things within your company. That has to be persuasive and accurate. It still does need a human. So that, I think, in a less regulated industry, the really forward ones, that's what a lot of what you're going to do. All the way back to maybe, like, if you're in a really highly regulated industry, you're still using Excel spreadsheets for everything. Maybe it is just using a tool like Rocket Docs, which is forward thinking. But, like, it has to be a little bit more, careful about what it does. And so, like, I think it's going to be using a tool like that. I think an RFP manager will have to be working with their chief risk officer or their CISO to be figuring out what that process looks like within their team and be the thought leader for what AI and proposal management looks like for them, and like from now to 2 years from now. And I think you have a lot of, especially in highly regulated markets, you have a lot of power in what that looks like for you, so you can kind of navigate that change within your company. So that's not like a really specific answer for them, but I think that's good because you have the power to decide what it looks like.
There's a part to it I'd love to dig in just a little bit more, which is, you mentioned that a key component is keeping information up to date and accurate. And I think a little bit of that's maybe the future role for people in this space is really being the folks that are ensuring that the information is accurate, up to date, on brand, written in the right way. Any guidance that you have for RFP professionals on, who have, historically, for some of them, been the folks that are either content writers and they're spending more time actually writing each time, or they're people who have been doing work, copying and pasting things. It's a transition to move into a space where your role goes from writing into individual responses or copying and pasting into being somebody who's like the librarian for the company of all of their company knowledge. So any guidance or thoughts or wisdom for folks as they look to the future where that might be the most crucial or critical skill set that's required to work inside of the, the future state?
Yeah, I think if you don't already, I think it's a great reason to go and speak to so many different people within your company to be that connector. Like you're saying, like, depending what industry, but it's gonna be like a product marketing, leader, a product leader, the IT leader, the sales leader. Like, there's gonna be so much content out there that needs to go into what you're already doing. And if you don't already have connections and like a close relationship with all those people, go and do that. So that, because no one's going to hand you a key and a medal and say, you are now the chief librarian for all of the content and knowledge within our company. That is not going to happen. You're going to have to go and do that yourself. So if that sounds like fun to you, if you're like have a content management background, you're like, great, sign me up. Go and do that right now. Make that a possibility right now. Yeah.
We'll do one last question for you. It's the final one we ask all our guests, right? You got 20 seconds to state any opinion that they think people should know about, whether it's about AI, about the response industry, about RFPs, tech, the future, security, proposals, you name it.
So I would say my biggest thing is when you are going to buy proposal management software, questionnaire software, you're probably doing it wrong if you're just looking at what is out there in general. Like, first, look at the problem that you have. What problem are you trying to solve for? And then go and shortlist the ones that can fit and fix that problem.
Okay, and then the final question is, what's the best way for people to find Stargazy, to find you, Christina, and your various different places where you exist and social? How do they reach you?
Stargazy.io. Stargazy links to everything. We're on LinkedIn, and then myself, LinkedIn, Christina Godfrey Carter. I post way too much, so I will annoy you if you follow me.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Christina. It's great to have you on.